Hello, this is Imani Latif, creator of Peep Game Comics. I'm here with my man Marcus Roberts. You're in the Black Comics universe right now. Um, Coming to you live on the experience. That's the underscore EXP. And this is part two of our discussion about the keys of Black comic book collecting. And just to give you guys a primer. This looks kind of weird because I'm on my phone this time around, but it gives you guys an idea as to what our discussion is going to be about and where we're headed. It's basically what we're discussing is not just collecting comics, but collecting in a particular niche of Black comic books. Um, I started comic. Um, I started collecting comics again, and I started collecting comic books again. And what I started with what I know, or at least what I enjoyed the most, and that was Black comics. And I was looking for, what I found was that the comic books, from out of the '90s and the modern comics that I would grew up on have become extremely rare. And so this has started this very interesting journey into comic book collecting. The other thing that I learned was that some of those comic books, I believe to be somewhat undervalued, and that's what sparked a conversation between me and Marcus about finding the true value of these comics, and I think that starts with having conversations like this. Marcus has a beautiful database of Black comics that we discussed last episode that we were together live. So this time around, we're going to our conversation last a few weeks ago was about some of the most rarest Black comics out there, and the books that we uncovered that Marcus uncovered and presented to me has some really fascinating stories behind it, and that's why I have him here. He's our the Black comic book historian with the velvet voice.
What's going on, everybody?
What's up, man? Coming straight out of Florida.
Coming straight out of the Sunshine State and enjoying
right. The best thing to come out of Florida, aside from my daughters. All right. Um. So yeah. When we were talking last time, we were talking over the phone, and we talked about specifically about. I asked you like, what are some of the most rarest Black comics? And when we say Black comics, I'll give you just so you can understand what we're talking about. It's not just comic books. We're talking about comic books created by Black creative teams. We're talking about comic books that have strong Black leads, right? We're also we're talking about comic books that are coming from Black publishers. Okay, so there's several different ways of defining this, um, and what you'll find is that some of the most valuable comics out there happen to be Black comic books, um, and or created by Black comic book creators or Black publishers. You also find that some of the most prolific Black comics or successful Black comics may not be your traditional comic books, right? In terms of they cover history and things like that nature, but they're still considered comic books. So I just wanted everybody to be mindful of that, of everything that you could possibly learn in this conversation. We're not just going to be throwing out a lot of numbers as to this is uh, this book might be booming or this is really hot. A lot of the books that we're going to be talking about um, have far more historical value more than anything else. So I'm gonna turn this over to you, man. So the question was, when we talked, we were looking for the top five or the five rarest Black comics, Marcus. Where do we start when we have that conversation?
We start in the 40s. We start with the comic book company called Better Comics. Better Comics produced a comic book called Best Comics. It was only 4 issues of this comic. and where the value and the historical significance come in, where with that is the comic book featured a character called the Red Mask. The Red Mask was a African prince, and on the cover of this comic, he's depicted as a black man. And this goes on for 4 issues. But what increases the value of the book is in issue 1, the Red Mask is depicted as a black man on the cover, and the interior pages, he's depicted as black as well. In issue 2, he's depicted as a white man, although the interior pages still depicted him as black. Same for issue 3 and issue 4. So he only got that one cover where you got to see him as the black character that he is featured in the book. So I would start right there. That's like I said, that would be in the 40s. Also in the 40s, we have to look at the works of the artist Matt Baker, and I'm quite sure everyone is familiar with Matt Baker and how prolific he was. He was known as the master of the feminine form because of how realistic he drew his characters. But
I think we have a copy of that book actually. What book was that?
I hadn't said a book yet, but the book that he gets his notoriety from is there was a publishing company called Golfing McCombs. They only published one comic, and that was Crown Comics. And in issue number 3 of Crown Comics, even though the character depicted on the cover was white, the character on the interior pages is black. The character's name is Voodah, Voodah.
Okay.
Now, in all the subsequent issues that the character appeared in, he appeared as white. But this was a character that was created by Matt Baker. And as I said, he premiered in Crown Comics number 3. And he did premiere as a black person, and he was whitewashed just like the Red Mask was. So those are top 2. Also with Matt Baker, and here's the number 3 comic book for a publishing company called St. John. Matt Baker penciled what is considered to be the first graphic novel. The title of that is It Rhymes with Lust. The lead character's name was Rust, but this was in the romance genre. There it is, It Rhymes with Lust. And Matt Baker penciled this. This was one of the first books of its kind, and as I said, it's considered to be the first graphic novel. So that book definitely has a spot in the top 5. Next, I would say the Negro Romance series. Now, the Negro Romance series was 3 issues. It was by Fawcett Publishing, and the thing about this is it's credited as being one of the first books to come out with an all-black creative team. It is what we know for fact, because during this time they didn't credit writers or artists for that matter, or the cover people. So if the publishing company itself didn't have those records, then you don't know who did it. But we know for a fact that Alvin Hollingsworth, who was himself a prolific black artist, was the artist on this book, the Negro Romance series. Alvin Hollingsworth also was the first black artist hired by Fawcett Publishing. And as the story goes, he had been hanging around their offices as a kind of gopher, He learned his art skill, then started picking up little small things to do here and there. And this is while he was a teen. At the age of 40, he was hired by Fawcett to be one of the regular artists. And this is one of the series that he did, the Negro Romance. Now, also some interesting history to go along with this. During this time, the Negro Romance series was one of a large number of romance books that came out because you know, as you go through each year, through each generation, uh, there are books or genres that are popular. And during this time, the romance genre was actually more popular than the superhero genre, which was still in its infancy. But the romance genre in comic books used to be a big thing. So Fawcett, I'm sure, taking advantage of that, they started this series. Something else interesting about this series is that the people depicted in the stories were lawyers, they were doctors, they were professional people. So it was not your stereotypical type of thing that you would expect from the 50s. It was something that is I consider to be a classic.
No, I also learned that this particular book, Negro Romance, what era is this? Is this the gold or bronze? I can't remember which era, but it happens to be one of the most valuable comics in its era.
I've seen this book. I've seen this book go for as much as $3,000.
Yeah, I've seen some. I just recently read this in the Overstreet Guide, and it's up there. Negro Romance is definitely one of the most valuable, black comics, most valuable comics, period. But definitely one of the most valuable black comics for sure.
Definitely, and that's why it has that spot there in the top five. And I would round the top five out with the Jackie Robinson series. It was 6 issues that was published by I forget off the top of my head. I think it was also published by Fawcett in the 1950s. 6 issues featuring Jackie Robinson. One thing that really started taking hold was after the all Negro comics came out, which of course I shouldn't even have to classify that in any kind of list as far as value and historical credence. But after Negro comics came out, there was a rush to produce books that featured in some kind of way a black character because they realized it was a black audience. So Publishers Home Weekly magazine published 2 issues of a book called Negro Stories or something along those lines, which featured, one of them featured George Washington Carver, and the other featured Jackie Robinson. Here we go. So yeah, with the onset of the all Negro comics, it showed that there was a black readership, that there were black people who read comics and were interested in it. With all Negro comics not having an issue 2, there was a rush to fill that void. So you started seeing more and more comic companies produce books featuring, as we see, black characters. But yes, I would round up my top 5 with that Jackie Robinson. And that covers the 40s and 50s.
Right. Again, like what we were saying last week, we were covering most of the modern era with Milestone, Tribe, and I think we were also discussing let's see, Milestone, Tribe, We were talking about the latest Falcon and Winter Soldier stuff. All these books, have gained in popularity and significance. Sorry about that, everybody.
You in there
Yeah.
with some echo.
Yeah. All right, that should be better. All right. I think now we're in business. But I appreciate your patience. Yeah, so we're talking about comic book collecting. We sat in the room. I'm with my man Marcus Roberts. I'm the creator of Second Sight Publishing, and we're talking about Black comic book collecting. And we just went through. We can recap those top five that we were talking about. Of course, we're talking about Negro Romance. That's number one. Well, not number one, but Negro Romance. Talking about the Jackie Robinson series. We talked about 3. It was was it Negro Heroes, right?
Best Comics.
Best Comics. Okay.
With the red mask.
Okay, there it is.
And there's issue 1, and as you see, the character on the cover depicted as a black person.
Gotcha.
And it tells you right in the corner, featuring the red mask. But in the subsequent issues, he was on the cover at least depicted as white, but still in the interior pages, he was depicted as black. So yeah, this definitely is one of the comic books I would consider on the top 5 list. This, as well as the Crown Comics number 3, which was the appearance of Matt Baker's character Vuda,
right?
Who, although he appeared white on the cover, was black on the interior pages. But in the subsequent issues of the series and his other appearances, he appeared as white. So you only have him being black in that one issue, which was the premiere issue.
Got it.
So that enhances the value for that book.
And then we were so I've been also looking into a book by IDW, also called Invisible Men. I had to put in an order for that through my comic book shop. They don't carry that. It's carried through you have to get it through Diamond, which is cool. And they actually uncover a lot of other. It's called Invisible Men, and they uncover a lot of Black comic book creators that that work behind the scenes that you might not have known were Black and things of that nature. So I'm very much interested in discussing that book when I get that copy in. When I get my copy in.
I've said for a long time that we've maintained a presence in the industry essentially from day one. The thing is, because the books weren't credited initially, you didn't know who did what, not unless the publisher told you who wrote the book, who drew the book. They didn't start, putting the credits on the cover of a comic book until Midnight Tales #1 that Wayne Howard did. Wayne Howard being a Black artist, penciled, ink, colored, wrote the book, did the cover. And at the time, the publisher said, he did everything on the book, so why not put his name on it? And that started the trend of putting the artist and writer's name on the front of books.
What's the name of that book again?
Midnight Tales.
Midnight Tales?
Yeah.
All right. And so there was some other, and I remember the last time we talked, just to give a little recap, we talked about the very first superhero, or the very first Black comic book character was in the very first comic book, right?
Right. Right. That was And the thing to remember is the origin of comic books comes from comic book strips. The very first comic book was just a collection of comic book strips. That collection of comic book strips was Mandrake the Magician, and Mandrake the Magician's assistant is Lothar. So Lothar was the very first black character to appear in a comic book. The very first black superhero, in fact, because Lothar's description was that he was uh, super strong and impervious to man-made weapons.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and I think because of the era of those books, the value of those books are definitely um, pretty much valued as where they need to be. However, what I found, like I think it starts in the modern era in the '90s. I noticed that um, some of those books of the same caliber, right? You know, black comic book creators are involved. Some of them are black publishers, but once you get into the modern era, and I think once we get into, say, for instance, the direct market, when that becomes a popular, I think we start to lose some of the value in some of those books, right? Um,
Yeah,
like Tribe, like some of the milestone books are starting to pick up in value, especially Static, right? That's
right.
basically that's on an upper trend right now with the announcement of a possible show coming soon. Um, and I found that some creators have found creative ways to add value to their books in the trading portion and in the collectors market, right?
Mm-hmm.
For instance, not Excellence, but Bitterroot, Dave Walker and them, they created a eBay exclusive, right?
Right.
That's valued at upwards of $500 something dollars. It's like a special Akira kind of Akira homage to the cover.
Right.
I know that, for instance, that book is extremely valuable, and I think there's a Philadelphia cover um, variant that's extremely valuable. When I interviewed the creator of Philadelphia, he was surprised at how valuable that was. Like he was sitting next to it, like a rack of those books that are valued at, I think those were valued at close to 800 something bucks. It's just ridiculous. And he was like, man, I got a whole rack of them sitting right here, you know. So you do find those stories, and yet there are some times I come across books that seem to like not quite hold the value that I think it should. And that's why we started this whole conversation. Like again, for instance, Brother Man still feels like we got to find a way to really add the real genuine value of that book, because I feel like that's such a historically significant book and it should be valued as such, right?
Oh, definitely. I mean, how many books do we know of that have been inducted into the Smithsonian? You know, Brother Man.
Is in this, yeah, they are in the
yeah,
Smithsonian.
yeah,
Right.
they're in the Smithsonian. So, I mean, that honor alone should add some value to the book, or at least make the book, by that significance, worth more than what your average book from that period would be. And that's where our discussions really came in, was looking at the books from the 90s, because like you were pointing out, the like the books that I just named from the 40s and 50s, even the books from the 60s, they have some good value to them. Lobo issue number 1 I've seen listed as high as 500. Lobo issue number 2 I've seen listed around 800. So, you know, these books, as we move more and more into the modern era, we see books that have value. It's just the interest that we show in the book to make it collectible. You mentioned the 90s. There are tons of books from out of that period that, because of what it represented, the explosion of Black publishers. There are tons of books from that period that should be valued more than what their cover price is. Particularly books from individuals that came out in the 90s, and these characters are still present in this day. Those early issues should be valued, should have some type of high value to them. Characters such as Dreadlocks, Purge, and we mentioned this on the last show. Even Jonathan McKellen's Jonathan Fox character. These were characters that came out in the 90s. Their books appeared in the 90s. And as a matter of fact, if you give me a minute to dig, I have those books.
Yeah.
I have a lot of those books down here because they represent, as I said, they really represent something. The Purge books.
Yeah.
I even still got the card in there, the 3D card in the book.
Wow. Okay.
And this is the same Purge that Roosevelt is putting out now in 2021. These books are from the 90s. So,
right.
Like I said, Jonathan McKellen, Jonathan Fox. He had a 3-issue Jonathan Fox series.
I think we got that book. Okay.
And I'm like, this dude, Jonathan Fox, is still out there. And some of the significance, and now we talk about historical significance and how it relates to these books. One of these significant things about this Jonathan McKellen's book, the Mariah Graphics Company, was the publisher on record, or at least the president of the publishing company, was a Black woman. And this is one of the first instances that I know of wherein there is a Black female leading a publishing company. If we still have that data sheet available, if you pull that up, that even gives you her name. And that kind of had me wondering, how many other companies out there that had Black females in the lead that we don't talk about or we don't know about. Because when I say the presence of Black people have been in comics for a long time, that includes Black females as well. We talked about Joan Backus on the last show of Golden Legacy. And
yes,
let's
talk a little bit about Golden Legacy. I think a lot of people might be familiar with that book if they were to see the cover, that you might have seen it growing up in grade school. I know I was. I'm familiar with seeing it in grade school. The Golden Legacy books, at least seeing it at my local library at the very least. And when I started my company, when I started looking for, Black comic book publishers, I was surprised to see that publishing company popped up first as one of the most, and I think they hold some records as to the most comic books published or the most successful Black comic book company. And they're not necessarily publishing what you would consider to be comics. These are sort of like, educational pieces, right?
Right.
And but I think we have one of that cover to Golden Legacy, I believe.
But the market had already been set, and this is the thing, and once again, the significance of the Publishers Home Weekly, when they published the Negro Heroes, because they published it on an actual person.
Mm-hmm.
Golden Legacy, it's not like they all of a sudden created something new. What they did was they knew this was there. They knew this niche was there. They knew that there was a black comic book audience that bought comic books, particularly comic books that featured actual black people. These books are more relatable. Then Golden Legacy took it up several notches by actually giving you history lessons in these books.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the Golden Legacy book, and I believe they still hold a good value to them as well. And they can still be purchased, the reprints of those books.
Yeah, I believe so. I think through their website.
Yeah.
Um, uh, but I will be interested in seeing like first prints and things like that. You might be able to find. I think I've seen them at libraries and things like that, but out in the wild, not too often.
No, you don't see them out too often.
Yeah. At least not anymore. But yeah, I have that. I have our little our trusty database up here again. Um, Let me see if I
Yeah,
can
because
share.
I want to go back to that Mariah Graphics and Jonathan McKellen with the Jonathan Fox series,
Mm-hmm.
because as I said, that is something that's significant, and as significant as it is, almost precedent setting. That book should have particularly a particular strong value within the Black comic collecting community.
What was the name of that book again?
It was Mariah Graphics, Jonathan Fox.
Oh, okay. Jonathan Fox. Oh, here we go. Let's see here. Jonathan Fox, John McCullum. Oh, published in 1993. Okay.
Yep. And what's those notes under that?
Monique McCullum. McCullum is one of the first Black female publishers. Okay.
Yeah. So as I was saying, that alone, the significance of that, because how often do we talk about Black female publishers from the 90s?
Right. No, but not very often. We could do a whole show on just Black females in comics. And it's like, I think it's important to have these conversations, especially about not just the writers, but to a large degree the illustrators.
Yeah.
Um, I'm amazed at how rare, as many. It's been very interesting lately because I've been meeting a lot of new comic book creators, right? Or at least they're mostly writers. They're publishing their first book and they're looking for artists and things like that. And I'm amazed at how rare it is to find a Black illustrator in those comic books, right?
Uh-huh.
So we're not just talking about the big two. We're talking about across the board. It's
Right.
like I can name about 10 very well established, very Black comic book illustrators, right?
Mm-hmm.
That are in both the indie world and both the what we call professional publishing world,
Mainstream.
the mainstream. But they're all of pretty much of equal caliber. Like they're all up there in ability, and I'm still very amazed at how little, how how rare it is for me to see them in books published, right?
Right.
And And I just think that's a significant, and how that plays into collecting is that what I find is some of the most valuable Black comics, right, have full Black creative teams. Um, I'm not necessarily sure that, I'm not necessarily saying that having a Black creative team makes it better. I'm saying that on the average, some of the most valuable, whether it's indie or from the mainstream, the most popular books have Black creative teams. Like the writer is Black, the illustrator is Black. Like Excellence, for instance, you have I'm not sure if the colorist is Black, but you got Curry Randolph on pencils. You have Brandon Thomas writing. You have Deron Bennett is on letters, right? And he's an Eisner Award winner. So it's like you have a full cast of creative teams, and then I can list the books where Bitterroot is another one. It's like I find that the trend is, and it's not to. I'm not saying that any creator should just throw out what their creative process and start from scratch. All I'm saying is that you can look at the numbers, and some of the best selling Black comics have Black creative teams working on those books, and they seem to gain a little bit more traction. John Jennings, for instance, with Black Kirby, with him, Stacey Robinson, and Damian Duffy. I'm noticing that as a trend, and I'm also noticing that and I'm putting it out there if no other reason than to encourage more indie creators to consider looking for a Black illustrator or a Black artist to work on your book, because I find it to be very rare. It doesn't happen often.
Well, I have,
and maybe you got an insight on that as a publisher.
One main thought about that is the popularity. When the artist is popular, that he's going to be the artist that people want, whether they want to work with him or want to buy their stuff.
Right.
When they're popular, that's just how things go. And it's hard for not just a Black artist, but for any artist that's starting out to gain the type of popularity or even notoriety that some of these other guys have. So people wait in line. They'll wait in line for these other guys to become available versus giving somebody else a shot. In the instances that these other guys get that shot, it's up to the other guy to make the best out of it, because they have to understand that some people are satisfied waiting in line. They'll wait in line for a big name versus getting the guy right now. So you find a lot of that.
It's something to consider for sure, because I do feel the sense of urgency from a lot of creators. As far you have the script done, find an artist, get thumbnails, sketches done, character design, get the ball rolling.
Right.
I definitely see definitely a sense of urgency. But I was in a live a couple of days ago, and I was just saying that at the same time, we can't forget the artistry, of the medium, that is still an art form. And so a lot of the conversations I've been in lately has been about the business, right? Marketing, whether it's finding a printer and working with an artist on a professional level, how much you should pay them as far as page rate, stuff like that go. That's definitely, all of the information I've come across has been accurate from the business standpoint, but I would just encourage, basically newcomers to the business side to not necessarily it might be beneficial to approach the artwork, approach it from an artist's perspective first. Make a comic, even if you can't draw. Like learn the method. You know, um, in a way to help you for you to understand. You know what it is you're trying to accomplish. With the artist, how to build a relationship with the artist, things of that nature. Um, and that all goes into the quality of the book.
Right.
Um,
Well, I think that really is the thing, the quality of the book, because uh, when Matt Baker was doing his book, he wasn't doing his book saying one day they're going to be collecting this.
right.
But you have artists who work with that approach. I want to make this going to be a collector's item. I'm going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars. This thing is going to be so valuable. The business portion, as you just said, and people focus more on the business versus really getting the artistry down and taking artistry in consideration. And that's why they're willing to wait in line for someone that they know is a comic pro versus, somebody that even though they've seen this guy, they even like this guy's art, they support and share his stuff, but they won't give him that paid opportunity to produce work.
Right.
And I think in that sense, that's skewed because art is so subjective until this person whom you overlook to wait in line for somebody else might be the next big thing.
Right. And I heard someone say that art is subjective, and yet is so key to all of this whole discussion, right? It's like these books aren't, a lot of the books that we're talking about from a collector's standpoint aren't unique just because the story makes it unique, of course, but also the art specifically, right? When you think of Brother Man, when I think of Brother Man, I think of how significant a role that Dawood Anubuele, the artist, played in inspiring tons of other Black artists that followed him. Kerry Randolph's style is a direct connection to Dawood, to that book. You know what I'm saying? And Dawood, he explained to me that he was inspired by Mad Comics, not comics, Mad Magazine. The comic book illustrations in that magazine. That's where he got his style from. But you'll notice that his style is very prevalent amongst a lot of modern artists right now. And so it is something to consider when when you're going into the whole process of creating a book, right? That, you want to, you're writing this book and in your mind, you say, I want this guy to look like, I hear this a lot, like they pick popular, they're already casting the film. Right. They're creating a book, right? So I want this guy to look like Jamie Foxx, or I want this guy to look like, whoever. Whatever, some popular movie guy, actor. But at the same time, you sort of lose track of some of the fundamentals of character design, like creating a powerful silhouette or the things of that nature. Color theory that goes into character designs. And I'm probably going off track of our original conversation.
Just a little bit, but let me bring it back. Let me bring it back.
Please.
With the Brother Man. One of the other significant things about it, and one of the other reasons why I feel it deserved that spot in the Smithsonian, is the art style, because now people may say that art style is cartoony,
right?
But knowing the history of comics, knowing comic sales, comic trends, what people gravitated toward. It is that particular art style, that particular style of book that has maintained over the years. Since the inception of the Disney books, they've always sold in the top 4 or 5 every year. Horror comics will fall out, superheroes will slide up and down, thriller, suspense, they fall in and out of that top 1, 2, 3, or 4 spot. But it's the cartoony books, the cartoon characters like Archie, like what's the Disney Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny. It's those comic books that have maintained a strong and steady sell. So capturing that type of style, but putting it in the type of story that it was in, once again, that's one of the reasons why it deserves to be where it is. It deserves that spot in the Smithsonian because it truly was not just a trendsetter, but it followed some very strong examples, and yet it created a whole different movement and ideology in comic books for an audience, because this was a Black comic book. This is a Black comic. Make no mistake about it. This is a Black comic book,
and they embraced so many other things. They did so many things different back then. This is the '90s. This is the burgeoning direct market. But this book specifically and intentionally sold their book in Black bookstores.
Yeah.
It was oversized. It wasn't your traditional comic book dimensions, right? It was magazine size, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't black and white, but if you, his inking style and gave the story such depth, even without it being in color, that the artwork is still amazing. And I can only imagine what his original artwork would go for. That would be I'll have to get him on here on the show to talk specifically about his work and his original man.
Because with the NFT market doing what it's doing,
right? All that stuff. I'm still nervous. I still have my doubts about NFTs. I'm not sure where that's all gonna go.
Well, that's another conversation for another day.
But the speculative market period with comics is just bananas right now.
And that's the whole thing, is it's all speculation. Right. So what we're doing now, even though it's speculation, we are trying to drive people to these books, drive people to find out more about these books, drive people to want to add these books to their collection. Because the bigger the demand the book is, then in order to meet the demand, the prices themselves of the books are going to increase exponentially.
And that would continue to encourage publishers to, create these books. Now that they see, as you said, now that they see the demand for the books. For instance, and mind you, we got about coming up on the hour. Other reason I like talking to you is you always give me very good keys to go hunting for, and I found a few of them. Hold on, I found. We were talking about Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And we were talking about everybody saw Elijah Bradley,
Isaiah, and Elijah,
and then and his grandson, right?
Eli,
right in the show. But then you hit me to another descendant of Bradley, which is Josiah X, in the comic book The Crew, right? I found that copy. I found a copy of The Crew. Let's see what else did we talk about. We talked about the issue, which is weird. We talked about the issue of Punisher, right?
Right.
Where he dresses up and he turns black.
Yeah, to hide from the mob, he
The high
undergoes this treatment that turned him black.
He turns black and he fights the mob alongside Luke Cage, right?
Yep.
And I'm gonna give you, and see, this is how my brain works, because now that I'm in this whole speculative market and all this kind of stuff, I'm picking up keys where I think there might be something to this. So when you told me about that book, right? And let's see if this, I'm putting this on wax now. So you know that Punisher they've been considering basically canceling that whole character because of the fact that police officers were using the Punisher logo to intimidate folks. And so they were having patches on their uniforms or T-shirts and all this kind of stuff. I think you might have seen the logo along with Captain America, the Captain America logo at that when they stormed the Capitol, right?
Right.
And so they've been thinking about, okay, well, we can't use this comic book character. And I was thinking that they've done this before. I think one of two things. I think they're going to either make Punisher a woman or make him black, which would make this book very interesting in terms of a key book, right? If they make the Punisher black. And as an extra bonus, I was thinking what would be really dope if you make Luke Cage the Punisher. Put Luke Cage in a Punisher t-shirt, man. And as soon as that, when you told me about that book, I went and found it, and I was kept thinking, I've been promised you, I've been racking my brain. I said, man, if they make Luke Cage the Punisher, man, you would solve so many problems, right? Because he's a vigilante, hero for hire. He don't care nothing about the police or anybody else for that matter. But
but when you read the book and you see the dynamic of the book, Luke Cage actually teaches the Punisher about restraint because Luke Cage is not a killer, even though he's a bruiser, but he's not a killer. So wherein the Punisher is a straight killer, he puts in work. So the pairing of those two, much like the original Power Man and Iron Fist, where Iron Fist was that yang to Luke Cage's yin. Those couple of issues where Punisher and Power Man interact, it's that same thing. Because like I said, the Punisher puts in work. He doesn't care. Right. He shoot him up, bang bang. Where Luke Cage, he's going to solve the problem. He's going to do what he has to do. But he's not a killer.
Yeah, true. But I wouldn't mind him, bashing a few heads in, every now and then. But
check out that 90s series. Check out that Luke Cage 90s series.
I picked up number one. We were talking about that. I picked up number one of Cage. With Dwayne Turner as the artist.
He definitely goes in and those 20 issues. They're trying to move him away from that black exploitation Cage that was prevalent. So they try to put him more in the vernacular of the 90s, more situations that mirrored what was going on there in the 90s. And then because of just the whole the way the comic market was going, he has what we call crossovers with different characters throughout that little series run. But it's a different Luke Cage. It's not the one that you saw in the original Hero for Hire or Power Man, Iron Fist.
All right, so we got about 4 more minutes. Like, what are some keys that you're gonna send me on the hunt for now? What you got for me?
Okay.
You came up big now, mind you. You came up big on the Falcon and Winter Soldier. You pulled out you found a whole bunch of dollar bin stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, here's something that we talked about with the Falcon, since the Falcon is the TV darling right now.
Right.
when the Falcon moved from one uniform to the other, because he started out in that little funky green and beige thing, and then from that he went to a red and white uniform, but it was pretty much the same style as the little funky green and beige thing.
Yeah, he looked like he was Bootsy Collins in them or something.
Yeah, but it was in Captain America, I think 170, where the Black Panther actually gave the Falcon the uniform with the wings. So there's one for you. And then during Christopher Priest's run on Captain America, during the Captain America, the Avengers Declassified, that once again the Black Panther actually gave Falcon a new uniform with upgraded wings, an upgraded uniform. So in the Marvel comic book universe, it's always been Black Panther who supplied the Falcon with his wings. The Black Panther gave the Falcon the ability to fly, because before he gave him the uniform, Falcon actually they met. Like I said, issue 170, Captain America 170. Check it out. I'm not going to tell you the story.
Captain America 170.
Yep. And as I said, you follow the Christopher Priest's run on Captain America, particularly during the Avengers Disassembled storyline, Captain America Disassembled, and you'll see where the Black Panther gave the Falcon his new set of wings, the holographic joints.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, we're almost out of time. I appreciate you, Marcus Roberts, of Second Sight Publishing. It's always good talking to you. For my man Marcus, for my producer Kyle, this is Imani Latif, creator of Peep Game Comics, and you were watching the Black Comix Universe Weekly. Thanks.
Peace.